Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily guide to decoding the current affairs the smart way for UPSC. It's today's edition and we bring you two important articles for your mains exam preparation. First, the NGT clearance for the Great Nicobar Project. We will be examining the environmental, strategic, tribal and regulatory dimensions of this mega development. Second, we will be having a look into the need for balanced federalism in the country, understanding how center-state relations must evolve for cooperative yet accountable governance. Finally, we will be wrapping up with crisp prelims pointers, which are high-yielding facts and concepts highly crucial for your upcoming prelims 2026 revision. So let's begin. So guys, finally, the National Green Tribunal has given the green signal to develop the Great Nicobar Project, which is a 92,000 ambitious project which is trying to totally transform the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands. Mainly, this project has been in the news on and off for the last 2 years because there were various environmental challenges and the concerns, and that is where India's topmost judicial authority, which is specialized in looking at environmental cases, forest protection and also looking at various environmental compensation issues, the National Green Tribunal has finally agreed that this project has a larger strategic interest because we are trying to totally transform the Indian Ocean region and also trying to counter China here. So that is why, considering strategic ambitions and also the environmental safeguards that the central government is trying to propose, the Green Tribunal has finally agreed that okay, this project should be going forward in the national interest. Now, when we try to decipher this topic from the absolute basics, we have to start from the prelims perspective firstly, by looking at the geographical aspects. Now guys, whenever we are talking about some PYQs like this, 2018 and 2017, if you can understand that they are asking that which of the following is geographically closest to the Nicobar Island. Also, when we talk about some specific geographical features such as volcanoes, we know that the Barren Island volcano, right, is present in that region. And also, if you look at this 2018 PYQ, they are trying to confuse you in statement number 1 and statement number 2. Firstly, they are telling that okay, Barren Island volcano is an active volcano. Second, they are telling that the last time the Barren Island volcano erupted was in 1991. So don't you think that they are contradictory in nature? So that is why let me know what is the answer in the comments below. So we have around 836 islands and only around 31 of them are inhabited by human beings. Mainly we have a large section of the indigenous tribal populations living there for centuries and even for thousands of years. Also, if you can look into the location of the main capital city of Port Blair, and the distance of Port Blair from mainland cities such as Kolkata, Visakhapatnam and Chennai, you find that Kolkata is actually closest to Port Blair. Also, another surprising fact is that even areas such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, they are much more closer than our own mainland India. So you understand that Andaman and Nicobar Islands are almost kind of an extension of India, which is much more to the eastern part. So that means in the Indian Ocean region, to establish our strategic dominance, we have to develop this part in a very expedited manner. And that is where we understand the main significance is that we share maritime borders with Indonesia, Myanmar and Thailand in the region. Also, when we talk about the biodiversity aspects here, we find that 95% of the island is covered by tropical rainforests. And in fact, the Andaman Nicobar Islands is actually part of the larger Sundaland biodiversity hotspot, which is actually taking into the various islands of Indonesia and even Andaman and Nicobar Islands when we talk about the huge natural biodiversity that we find here. And that is why these islands are also known as living libraries. So you should be including these terms in your mains examination. Now, when we talk about the project finally, we understand that this project will be totally transforming the Nicobar Island, which is the southern sections of the island. Now, the main implementing agency of this project will be the Andaman and Nicobar Islands Integrated Development Corporation, which has been set up, especially for looking into the implementation of the projects here. And this will be costing around 92,000 crore as of 2026 numbers. Now, what all will be included as a part of this project? Firstly, a transshipment port. transshipment ports are actually much more important and more advanced versions of the ports that we normally have. Now these ports have mega terminals. These ports have extended and very big areas for cargoes so that many ships can come, and also these ships are much more advanced, almost like the Colombo port that we have in Sri Lanka, or say when we talk about India developing to the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore. This is where we are trying to achieve the same. Also, there will be an international airport where it will be a dual use one, civilian and defense forces both can use it. Also, power plants will be set up. Initially, we will be using fossil fuels by powering gas and various other thermal coal-based power plants. Gradually, over the period of time, mainly the objective is to move on to the renewable energy, that is promoting solar energy there, because we do not want to actually commit a lot of fossil fuel based pollution there, right? Also, at the end of the day, there will be townships, and here as of now there are around 8,000 people living in the islands there, but over a period of time we should be housing around 3.5 lakh people. Why? Because all of these sections of the population will be working at the port, at the airport, power plants. Also, we are trying to promote tourism, so we have to build more hotels, resorts and various other restaurants and so many other infrastructure. So all these projects we have talked about, the port, the airport, mainly if you can actually map it on the Great Nicobar Island, if you find that these projects are located along the coastal side, because to the north we have two national parks, the Campbell Bay National Park and the Galathea National Park, and that is exactly why we have to understand that whatever strategic development is going to take place is concentrated heavily in the southern sections. Now, the National Green Tribunal has approved this project mainly in the national interest, because firstly, when we talk about developing this region as a whole, we had this idea firstly in the 1970s when India and China just came out of a war and India faced numerous defeats. So India was also worried that if China would corner India on the Indian Ocean region or not. Now this idea was not slated on for decades. Finally in 2022, and after that period of time, after even the Niti Aayog proposed this project, we came up with funding to the tune of 92,000 crore. Environmental clearance was granted in 2022, and here there were so many safeguards which were proposed by the government of India that we are also going to look at in the very end. Now understand that strategically, if you look at the Nicobar Islands here, they are highly close to the Indonesian region and most importantly the Strait of Malacca, where around 30 to 40% of the entire global trade happens. Major shipments of crude oil and so many other exports of goods take place through this region. So naturally, the areas in and around this region are actually quite prosperous, because mainly the business houses and the local merchants, they benefit a lot in offering the various services to the ships passing nearby. And that is why maybe if we can develop the same in this region too of our country, we will also be developing the same. So the Straits of Malacca, Sunda and Lombok are actually highly strategically important. So important that more than 70% of Chinese exports and imports pass through this region. So naturally China will be very interested. So that is why China is building various sophisticated military facilities at the Coco Island, for example, in Myanmar. Right? Actually, if you can understand, this is the Coco Island that we are talking about. And China is trying to invest a lot because China wants to make the various imports and exports of their country secure in this region. Apart from this, China is also sending various vessels, ships to the Indian Ocean region, because it becomes very naughty sometimes by thinking that it will actually provoke India by taking some action or attacking Chinese ships and so on. Because China loves to go in conflicts with various countries. If you look at the South China Sea or even the conflict that China has with Japan, so and also the same that we have with China along the entire northern border of our country, China always loves keeping various other countries in conflict itself. So this will be the project to counter that particular aspirations. And mainly when we talk about bringing in the overall regional connectivity in this particular Indian Ocean region and also the overall Pacific region, we are talking about our Southeast Asian neighboring countries also. So if we develop this region itself, if we try to have a transshipment port and also various tourism services, we will be having a better version of Act East policy, where we are trying to promote more and more good relations on economic, military, and even when we talk about a people-to-people contact. Finally, at the end of the day, various experts also suggest that if we go on to redevelop this project itself, we can actually discover various oil reserves and also the various deep sea minerals, right? Because the Indian Ocean region is actually highly rich in such minerals, but definitely there are some concerns. So the first concern is actually about the local people. Now, when we try to discuss this, firstly look at the 2019 question regarding the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, because there is one tribal community known as the Shompen. Now the Shompens have been living in these islands for thousands of years. In fact, they are actually known as one of the earliest residents of Indian subcontinent itself. Now, when we try to displace them just in the name of some infrastructural project, it actually goes against our ethics. Now, when we talk about this question itself, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups actually are those tribal sections where they follow centuries old and sometimes even thousands of years old cultural traditions, social traditions in such a way that they are actually much more socially backward than the mainland India. Now, when we talk about the mainstream India, we have better literacy rates, we have better health outcomes, but these groups are totally isolated from us. So even a small infection can totally wipe out the entire tribal sections there. So if you know the answer to this PYQ, let me know in the comments below. So that is why, let us go back to the topic here. This displacement of these local tribal sections is a cause of concern. Firstly, on an ethical level. Secondly, on a legal level, we understand that the Forest Rights Act of 2006 ensures that the tribal sections of the population and also the various other forest dwellers, they are entitled to their land rights, provided that they have been resident in the region for various time period. And that is where we understand that Shompen are naturally entitled to various land titles and land records. Despite that, the Gram Sabha in that region is overpowered by such projects in national interests. So definitely we understand that the government of India is telling that the tribal consent was approved. But experts tell that the consent which was given by the tribal councils was maybe not obtained in a very fair manner. Maybe initially the tribal council actually gave no objection to this project, but later on the tribal council themselves revoked that because they gradually understood the larger evils of the project themselves for their own local survival. Now the next concern is ecological in nature, because this project will be leading to the deforestation of 1 million trees, and we already have known that 95% of the islands are covered with tropical evergreen forests. So these forests are actually one of the most dense regions of our country where we actually get a lot of our oxygen supply to. The second concern is actually the survival of these leatherback turtles. You understand that these giant leatherback turtles are actually one of the largest turtle species on the earth. Now what happens that during their breeding season, hundreds of turtles come onto the coasts of the Great Nicobar Island and they lay their eggs in their nests, right? So this massed nesting will be disrupted. What will happen to those turtles? Also, what will happen to all of these species, as you can understand? So this is the Nicobar megapod, right? Also we have the Nicobar long-tailed macaque in this region. Also we find the Robert crab. We are finding new species as of November 2025. We found a new wolf snake species. So God knows how many new species are there in the island right now. If these projects go on, it will lead to their destruction. Now the next concern in economics and also legal aspects. Firstly, the experts themselves tell that we are expecting that that the Great Nicobar Island will be kind of a substitute for the Malacca Straits and all those regions. But still, the project is not yet developed. We do not have understanding if at all the various international shipping companies will be using our islands or not. for various shipping concerns, or even if there will be lots of tourists in the region or not. Next, we also have seen that over a period of time, initially the project cost was around 72,000 crore. Now it is around 92,000 crore. So this means that costs are increasing, and also if you are building some projects on some island areas of our country, it actually costs more, because if you build some projects in Delhi, in Mumbai, and various other cities, it is much more easier because supplies are near, raw material you can easily get, but those things you have to transport to the islands, and that doubles the cost. Also, the budget has increased 20% in 4 years. That means more taxpayers' money is actually going into this kind of projects, which are only getting costlier day by day. Also, for example, most of the projects and most of the various infrastructure that will take place here will be developed by taking loans from the banks. Now, various economic experts themselves are telling that the interest costs will be much more than the revenue, at least in the initial few years. That means in the initial few years, it would be maybe at the public expense, where the government can actually go on to do some viability gap funding. This means that 60% of the cost will be given by Government of India and 40% will be given by the private sector. Why, if you may ask? Because simply remember this thing, that if you are constructing some projects in islands, it will take double the cost, and if there are double costs, private sector will not be interested in spending 100% of the money, and that is why the government will tell, okay, that project is actually important for national significance, so let me contribute some money, but all of this money will be going from the taxpayers' money. Now the next issue is actually with reference to the various legal issues that we face. For example, if you actually understand that the coastal areas of our country are very ecologically sensitive. On the coast we have various amounts of natural resources such as coastal forests, deltas, and that is why the Government of India, in consultation with the state governments also, actually regulates some zones. Now in these zones you cannot do a lot of human-made activities such as big buildings or various mega infrastructural projects. So based on that, we have the coastal regulation zones tailored for the islands. Now guys, that on our islands, for example, on the coasts themselves, during high tides, the waters maybe generally reach up to this level, and during low tides the water will be reaching up to this level. Now this is where you understand that in this middle region there can be some small ports that can be developed, some jetties and some erosion control structures, for example, to prevent illegal sand mining. Now these are known as the CRZ-1B regions. CRZ-1 regions are those regions which are actually filled with, for example, mangroves, coral reefs. Now these need a 50-meter buffer zone. That means that if you are building some ports on some CR1 zones, it is totally prohibited. If you can actually build one on CRZ-1B, then you are actually allowed to do some small port jetties and etc. Now, what the government did, according to various ecological experts, government rushed various clearances in these CRZ-1 zones which were classified as CRZ-1B zones. You understand, right? That the government is overnight trying to change the definition of these regions itself according to various activists. And on this region, we are trying to have a port, airport, defense township and various other township areas, right? And this is actually leading to the various destruction of the local natural environment, because initially they were the CRZ-1 region. They are not these regions in this particular matter. Also, at the end of the day, this region is prone to various natural disasters. No one can ever forget the 2004 tsunami that took place, and even the recent Myanmar earthquake which took place in 2025, because this region is very close to the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is actually a long continuous semicircular chain of volcanoes and various fragile tectonic plates. So this is exactly why if we do some mega projects such as this can also upset the plates underneath the oceans, and maybe there can be various natural catastrophe in the region itself. So in this backdrop, now let us actually look into what would be the way forward in this matter. Firstly, there can be an appeal at the Supreme Court under the special leave petition under Article 136, because the National Green Tribunal has given the green signal. Right? Now there will be an appeal to the Supreme Court in this matter. So maybe the Supreme Court will be now looking at the environmental clearances, also looking into the classification of this coastal regulation zone, also into the various displacement of the people under Forest Rights Act. Now also we need a phase gate model. For example, we have to develop the islands in a phase-way manner. We cannot develop the airport, the port all at once. Let us firstly, for example, develop the port. Then if there are some concerns, we will be developing the airport at a much more slower pace. So that is why a phase gate model is important. Next, also we should be following the Champagne policy of not interfering in their day-to-day lives too much, because even a small infection can wipe out their entire community. So that is how we should be totally be dedicated with reference to their own displacement. Also, we have a huge island carrying capacity cost due to such projects. That is why a framework must be brought in, wherein all the various costs and the benefits should be factored in, and this we can actually follow the Niti Aayog framework. Next, for this project itself and the various other environmental projects, we have to have a eco watchdog committee. Now this committee will be looking into in detail, consisting from various experts' advice as to whether such projects should be going forward or not. For example, the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands fall under Zone 5, vulnerability to earthquakes, and that is where we should be also adhering to the various building codes, the norms of such regions. Next, we should be adhering to National Green Tribunal's order, which went for strict compliance. That means that if there would be deforestation, we should be doing compensatory afforestation, and most probably that will take place in Haryana and Madhya Pradesh. Also, we have to understand that much land is not available, and that is why we are doing the same in other states. Next, the coral translocation has been advised by the NGT. Whatever coral displacement will happening, it should be again replanted in various other sections of the particular islands. Next, a turtle conservation plan must be done. So this was all for this article. Now we have a mains practice question for all of you. We will now move on to the next one. Guys, in the Hindu today, we actually have an article by the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, who is focusing on the need for balanced federalism in the country. Now let us actually start by understanding from absolute basics of federalism. We know that federalism is actually the effective division of power between the central government and the state governments. Now in the entire world, we have so many models of federalism. We have the unitary model, where countries such as France and UK have a very strong center where the states are actually kind of irrelevant, right? Now we also have the classical models of the US, where US is actually considered as one of the most successful countries where federalism can be seen visibly, right? Because here the states sometimes even have their own constitutions and their flags. So countries like US actually are following that model of federalism. Now in India, we actually have the national government, the union government and the state governments, and here the power is actually shared effectively between them. But the nature of the sharing of powers is actually much more tilted toward the center, towards the union government, right? And that is where we understand that India, according to even K.C. Ware, and the nature of our constitution is actually designed in such a way that it will be having a kind of a unitary bias. But for example, if we talk about the modern day, we actually follow two principles of federalism: cooperative federalism and competitive federalism. Countries such as Germany also has this. For example, if we want to promote better and healthy competition between the state governments, we have to actually give them defined powers, equal footing with the center and various other aspects. But here, the author here is trying to give us a genealogy or chronology of how federalism evolved in the country. Now for the first time, the various sections of federalism and the powers of the state governments were actually interested in the Government of India Act of 1935. Next, when we talk about independent India, we have seen how partition led to various issues. Also, we had around 14 provinces and 500 plus princely states which were consolidated within our country. But this consolidation was not peaceful. We needed a very strong center to ensure that all these provinces and the princely states follow the rule of the land, because each of them were having various issues of migration, of language crisis, of extreme low poverty levels, and that is why independent India actually needed a very strong center. And this was actually what our founding fathers were also concerned with in the Constituent Assembly debates. Almost all of the various members there were agreeing that okay, right now we need a strong center. And because there are so many centrifugal forces, which means that there are so many regional and local issues which can divide India right now, and that is why let us actually give a very strong center with actually an unitary bias. And according to various experts right now, this kind of quasi-federalism that India follows right now was actually need of the hour during the time of the independence. Even back then, Pandit K. Santanam, he actually was one of the first persons to tell that okay, if you are going with this quasi-federalism going forward, maybe 10 years, 20, 30, 50, 60 years onwards, there will be some issues with reference to center and the states fighting with each other. So this is where brings me to 2021 and 2017 questions. Now you answered this in the comments below. We will now actually understand how federalism evolved over a period of time in the country. Now we just talked about the first phase of our Indian federalism, which is from 1950s to 60s, when our nation was actually very weak and fragile. It just became independent, it just faced partition, it would also face various wars and conflicts later on, and there would be various communal violence and so many other local and regional issues. And that is why we understand we needed a very strong center. Alongside the same, when we talk about the social and economic indicators, illiteracy was actually kind of widespread, poverty rates were extremely high, India was dependent on imports for even the basic commodities such as food and wheat. So that is why central policies needed better coordination, and we followed that model. Phase 2 came in 1970s and 80s, where in India for the first time we saw a single party dominance on a very wide scale, where for the first time, in Delhi, the ruling majority party would command what the chief ministers in the various other parts of the country would follow, and that should be followed. Otherwise, you have seen how as of now there have been instances of 90 plus instances of imposition of emergency. Article 356 imposed more than 90 plus times. Also, understand that a majority of the emergency impositions took place during these 70s and 80s decades, during which we actually also had the infamous national emergency. And whenever national emergency happens, we know that the state governments, the chief ministers, the council of ministers at the state level, all are kind of ineffective, with the main power going to the central government. During this time, they were also following this high command culture. Also, going forward, 89 to 2014 was during that time when we firstly saw the rise of regional parties. When regional parties mainly from Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and various other parts of the country, for example Bihar, right, they became very prominent at the national level, because at the national level, in the Lok Sabha, various ruling parties could not even get majority, and that is when we had coalition governments. In coalition, guys, all of the partners, they try to live in harmony with each other because they would not fight too much, otherwise their majority would be upset and various other parties then would stake the government. And that is why the national government during this time actually listened to various state governments. And if you see, during this period, a lot of development in the various respective state governments also took place, because the various regional parties did federal bargaining when it came to the various national highways to be built in one state or not, or railway lines to be laid in one state or not, or airports, or various food infrastructure, agricultural initiatives, all of them were focused during this time. And hence, federalism was actually kind of strong, because the various regional parties became kingmakers and they had a lot of power. In UP also, you can actually let me know in the comments which were actually those parties which bargained a lot for the development of UP during this time. Next, the next phase come in the present time, that is after 2014 till present times here. So these are all the issues that we find right now according to the author. Firstly, According to the author, the single party rule has returned again, just like the phase 2. Also, the constitutional amendments over a period of time, for example such as GST and various other ones, eroded the state authority and autonomy. Also, centralized scheme, governance role, language policy, finance commission and the funds which are devolved, all are the things that the state governments are concerned with. Let us actually look into these manifestations of a strong center through these policies one by one. Firstly, the central government, the state governments actually follow their own union and state list separately. But when it comes to the concurrent list, both the center and the state has the authority to frame matters and legislations on education, forest, wildlife, etc. But when the center would make a law, that would be paramount and more important than the state government law. So in recent times we have seen how we have had various education policies, economic policies and various other aspects, for example even the farm laws, right, where using this concurrent list and some of the manipulations within that, those laws were passed. So this actually sometimes go against the state autonomy, because these agricultural, economic, wildlife, these are all the ground level, local level issues which the state say that the center should not be concerned with. Also, there is something which we know as a subordinate legislation. For example, the parliament would make a law and then finally the executive or the bureaucracy, that is you, everyone will be who will be becoming IAS, IPS officers, you all will be making or say making micro laws or ground level implementations, and you also will be implementing the laws there, right? So according to the various state governments right now, there are so many union laws which are made, and finally at the end of the day, the bureaucratic notifications sometimes go against the state government spirit. The Finance Commission itself does not have any authority to give the charges and the money collected and the cess and the surcharges, because these kind of education, health cess or surcharges or income taxes, they are actually dependent only on the discretion of the central government whether they would share the revenue with the state government or not. So that means as of now we are seeing more of the cess and the surcharges increasing. Also, the kind of transfers or the money that would go to the state governments are sometimes right now based on some performance based indicators, right? For example, if some state government would perform well on renewable energy, that state would get more funds, for example, or say some state government is taking some good measures to increase tax collection, that state government would get more funds. So this kind of conditional transfers is sometimes maybe leaving behind some poor states too. Next, there are some centrally sponsored schemes where part of the money will be given by the center and part of the money will be given by the state government. For example, the Jal Jeevan Mission, Ayushman Bharat, Awas Yojana, all of these require central assistance plus the state government funds. Now, the states tell that okay, center is coming up with new initiatives. These are not our initiative. And if we were implementing these initiatives in my state, then I have to spend money, which I do not have, for example, maybe. So this is a concern again. Also, if we see right now, there are more instances of governor's discretion being used, whether it is related to the passing of bills or delaying the passing of bills or referring to the president itself. This has increased since 2014. And it is actually going against the electoral mandate that is given by the people of the state to the state government's chief minister and various other ministers, right? Also, the imposition of Article 356 always remains a threat nowadays according to the various state governments, because the imposition of emergency is right now imposed via using the clause of breakdown of constitutional machinery. Maybe sometimes the government of some state government is not from the ruling party, and that is where the ruling party can take some cases of law and order breakdown or some communal riots as constitutional breakdown and can take over the state government via emergencies. At the end of the day, the goods and service taxes come after the regime of the value added taxes, where the state governments actually had some freedom to set some taxation charges. And back then, actually the state government budget used to be a very big thing. Right now, the budget presentation of the state governments is not a very big thing, because mainly the powers of taxation and the various other aspects related to indirect taxes are right now decided between the center plus the states combined. And this is where the GST Council is coming into picture, where the presence of the state governments are there but the central government is having around 33% of the vote. So any kind of major decisions can be influenced by the center. Also, the GST compensation cess was brought in to compensate the states for implementing the GST back in 2017-18. The states were very worried that they would lose revenue due to this new taxation. So the government told that okay, there would be a compensation cess, but that cess is not actually distributed equally among the states according to the various state government chief ministers even. Also, the GST and the revenues due to the same is always volatile in nature. And due to these various issues, the Tamil Nadu state has come up with Justice Kurian Committee. Now this committee is actually following the Rajamannar Committee of 1969, which actually was one of the very first committees to propose various reforms between the center and the state relations, right? And mainly as of now, the part 1 of this committee will be focusing on the challenges regarding governor, language policy, delimitation, GST, education and health. For example, if we talk about the delimitation, the delimitation will happen after the 2026 census, and that the population of the North Indian states are actually much more than the South Indian states. So the South Indian states actually fear that there would be much more seats which will be created in the Lok Sabha or in the Rajya Sabha in the North India level. So there will be less representation of the South India at the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Also, one of the most contemporary challenges will be the one nation, one election, because according to various experts and also various political activists, one nation, one election can actually make one party dominant at the state level and the central level too, right? Next comes the education and the health central sponsored schemes. Remember all the schemes that we talked about, where the state government definitely have to put in money if they want to implement some central government sponsored scheme in the state. So they would also look into what kind of issues are there. Also, this committee will be looking into one major issue right now, that is a language policy. South Indian states feel that the government of the day is imposing Hindi compulsorily over official matters, over non-official matters. So it will also look into this. And a majority of the changes and the recommendation that this committee would look into would be the governor's role, its discretionary power, time-bound assent to various state bills. It will also recommend some clear guidelines on whether some bill should be sent for presidential reference or not. It will also look into reforming the GST. Now, why we are all discussing this? Because in 2020, there was a question that Indian Constitution exhibits centralizing tendencies to maintain unity and integrity of the nation. So these are all the centralizing tendencies, right? And they are actually asking you that during the COVID pandemic, the Epidemic Diseases Act, the Disaster Management Act and the Farm Acts, whether these were hurting, the various central state relations or not. So that is where you now need to understand what is the strategic way forward. Firstly, we have to understand that some issues of national interests, for example, defense and security, this is what the center should be concerned with. Because, for example, if we look at the grassroots democracy, right, famous schemes such as the midday meal right now, the public health model that we follow right now, the Manrega initiative that we follow right now, were all the best practices of various state governments. So that is why the state government should be doing parallel experimentation, and mainly the most important national task should be left at the central level. Also, the state government should be given more funds, and those conditional transfers, GST revenues, all of these must be made much more transparent. Also, the central government should be restraining from framing rules and regulations on local issues, right, mainly on the concurrent lists, right, and majority of those things must be left to the state government. Also, if you look at the Sarkaria committee recommendations, right, when we talk about the appointment of various governors in the state government, mostly it recommended that the governor should be an outsider, right, it should be a detached figure from politics. Also, the chief minister should be consulted before appointing, but these recommendations are not yet been taken up. Apart from this, we should also be trying to develop the state capacity in various institutions and various amounts of, say, appointments such as governors, right? The state government should be consulted. Also, S.R. Bommai in 1994 Supreme Court case, which is a landmark case, told that federalism is a basic structure. It gave various recommendations on the appointment of governors and also the imposition of emergency. all of those must be followed in letter and spirit. And at the end of the day, let there be debate. Let there be more debate at the local level, at the state level, and even the central level. More debates actually bring in more and better democratic principles. So that was all for these articles. Now we'll be moving on to the prelims pointers. Before that, please do attempt this kind of mains questions. So we have a very lengthy article, but I will be trying to simplify it according to the need of the examination here for your prelims and GS1 and GS2 when it comes to the denotified tribes. Now, denotified tribes earlier were infamously known as criminal tribes. They were actually known as born criminals. They were actually known as addicted to committed crimes. Also, they were infamously associated with potential criminals. But what the British administration back in the colonial times tried to actually control were three kinds of population. The denotified tribes, which were generally the tribes which were involved in various criminal activities according to the British, but they were actually fighting against the British resistance. Also, there were various semi-nomadic and nomadic tribes. So these were the sections of the population which were given this kind of names. And even a Colonial Criminal Tribes Act was enacted in 1971 to restrict their movement, to arrest them, to detain them, right? But when we talk about the real nature of these individuals, they were actually normal people. They were nomadic tribes. You know, nomadic tribes, they go from one forest to another, one grassland to another. They are, for example, communities such as the Banjaras, the Gaddi, the Gujjar communities, right? A lot of them are still resident in various parts of the states. So this is where we have to understand that these are actually people who were resident in those regions for thousands of years. But if you can understand, in 1911 census, the British kind of legalized these kind of institutions too, right? For example, their last count was given in 1931 census. After that, we did not get any proper count of how many denotified tribes or the various tribal sections that we were talking about were present. After independence, definitely the government of India straight away cancelled this act. The government of India renamed it as Habitual Offenders Act. So generally, these were the various communities who belong to the SC, ST or even the OBC lists. So there are various state governments which came up with some amounts of reservation or some protection for these communities. But mostly when we talk about the denotified tribes, as of now we do not have any national level notification for them to be classified as backward class or OBCs or STs or SCs, right? So they are right now only known as denotified tribes because they are right now denotified from the earlier Criminal Tribes Act, right? Now, what is happening as of now, the government of India over a period of time since independence have had taken so many measures for mainly the SC and the ST communities and also the OBC communities. But if the state governments do not notify them as these communities, the government cannot do anything or say various measures cannot be taken for them. And it is also the failure of the government. For example, there is a scheme known as Scheme for Economic Empowerment of DNTs, specially dedicated for the denotified tribes. So it is having a total corpus of around 200 crore implemented to be around by 2025-26, mainly looking at education, health, various job opportunities and also giving them pakka houses under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. But this scheme has not been utilized properly, and there are so many people from the denotified sections of the population who also tell that a certificate about their status is not even given by the state government, right? Also, the backwardness, for example, in one state is much more bad when it compares to other states. For example, say at a national level, the DNTs are not at all equal. In some states, they have some OBC status. In some other states, they do not have any status at all. So they are facing a generational poverty level. Also, the historical narrative against their tribes, that they were criminals, they were this, they were that, they are still being labeled right now, right? They are still being cancelled right now by the people. And that is where these issues are actually plaguing them for a long period of time. and that is why they are coming up with so many demands. Firstly, they demand a constitutional status for their backwardness. That is, they should be classified based on constitutional provisions. Also, they demand that the upcoming census should be having a column known as DNTs. That since 1931 there has been no census for them, right? And that is why we should be trying to understand how many people are there in this community. But the government is telling that okay, we can include the census one, but we cannot make a constitutional body for you. We will be having a welfare board under the Ministry of Social Justice, but not a constitutional body. Now, despite their demands and also the government response, we now have to look at some of the various commissions which are set up to look into their matters. Firstly, the Iyengar committee, right? For example, it was actually the very first committee to look into the conditions of the DNTs. Second, in 2008, we had the Renke Commission. It is actually officially first national commission which recommended measures, but these recommended measures were not taken up. Also, we had the IDAT committee of 2017. The IDAT committee actually notified or identified around 1,200 communities which were in various leads in the various state governments, right? And it found that 268 communities were not classified at all. They were not classified as either of these communities at all. And the socio-economic levels this community found out in this particular DNTs were very, very low. That is why they needed the government of India to help them out. Next, the Niti Aayog, along with the Anthropologic Survey of India, they also found out that there were around 268 DNTs in the country, but the recommendations and the report of the same are still in cold storage. That means action is not being taken to actually help these communities getting classified. Because here mainly what the issue is happening is the conflict between center and state. The center is telling that it is the state government responsibility to notify them as SC, ST or OBCs, and the state government is telling that okay, the funds and the various other incentives and also the overall broad dimension and the definition of DNTs is not yet clear. And that is why we need to conduct the census right now. Firstly, we need to understand officially how many sections of DNTs are not yet classified, what is their total strength, and that is when we can have proper figures to take steps for them. Now we will be moving on to the next one. In the last month, we had a look into the medical termination of pregnancy. Now we are also having one more article. Here it is the Indian Express editorial on a recent Supreme Court case on the same. Now firstly, let us revise the medical termination of pregnancy and its various conditions. For example, if there is a woman who is pregnant and that woman seeks to conduct abortion, so there are various gestational periods and the various permissions required according to those periods here. Now, firstly, if that pregnant woman is between 0 to 20 weeks of pregnancy, to abort that pregnancy, that woman needs one medical practitioner recommendation. But not everyone can do that. There are some grounds for the same. And these grounds are, for example, if that pregnancy is posing a risk to the life of that woman or is posing a risk to the mental, physical health of the woman, or if there is a chance that the child who would be delivered would not be having a normal life ahead because the fetus right now is actually abnormal, or if there were some issues with the failure of the contraceptive device, right? And now it is applicable to any woman, married or unmarried. It is very important for your prelims, guys. Also, if that particular woman is between 20 to 24 weeks, you need 2 medical practitioners right now because it is right now a serious case, because the fetus is no longer at a very low level of development. Right now the fetus is almost ready for delivery, right? That is why you are actually talking about taking a life if you are aborting that child. So things must be very serious and very, very exceptional. Now that is why only for special categories, for example, women who are survivors of rape or incest or minors, or there has been change in the marital status. For example, that woman earlier was married, right now they are widowed or divorced, or women with disabilities, or in various emergencies or disasters, this is permitted. The last category is actually the most serious category, that is beyond 24 weeks. Here, that woman needs permission from the state medical board. And this is only allowed for various serious fetal disease or various physical issues or various other issues with the unborn baby, right? So firstly, the medical board of the state government, it will be looking into a detailed examination. Doctors and all experts will be consulted, and there is no upper limit here. That is, even one day before delivery, that fetus can be terminated legally, right? And in all these aspects, the consent of the husband is not important, consent of the in-laws is not important, consent of the parents are not important. Here only the consent of the pregnant woman is important, because that woman is actually bearing the child. And in all through this process, privacy has to be ensured. The names, details and everything has to be kept confidential by the hospital. And it is actually a crime which can be amounted to even jail and fines if privacy is hampered. Right? So this is exactly what brings me to the present case. Now look at this one, guys. 2 weeks ago, the Bombay High Court denied a 28-week abortion to a teenager. Why? Because the teenager told that carrying the child or giving birth to the child would cause mental trauma, because the teen or the teenager is not yet an adult, and that particular girl is not yet be able to say cope up with bringing a child while she is almost a child herself, right? So this is exactly why the girl approached the Bombay High Court and told the Bombay High Court that, okay, you give me the relief in this case. Bombay High Court told no, because mental trauma is not actually a ground under the beyond 24 or 28 weeks of termination of pregnancy, right? It can only be possible if the fetus is facing some deep abnormalities. The Bombay High Court told that the fetus is healthy, right? And your mental trauma is not enough to justify your case, right? So the Bombay High Court actually went ahead with the fact that right now your baby is almost having a life and soon will be delivered. It is much more important than your mental stress. But Supreme Court clarified by bringing in the Indian societal dimensions, and that is why always in life you also have to follow balanced approach. Supreme Court told that in India as of now, we have a lot of importance to Indian family law and protecting family honor versus pure individual rights. This is also a kind of a conflicting and controversial statement, but yeah, it is applicable in the broader Indian jurisprudence at the end of the day. In the comments, you let me know whether you agree with this or not. But yeah, the Supreme Court told that, okay, this girl can go ahead with the abortion because mental trauma can impact the child going forward. Mental trauma can alienate the newborn child after delivery. Maybe the mother, the teen mother, will not be able to take care of the child properly. If you go onto YouTube, you will be seeing so many videos of teen mothers, mainly from US and even from India, where their lives are totally turned upside down, where she would go to actually schools and colleges to get education and jobs. They are actually handling the various child and their upbringing and various other issues, which is totally leading to the lack of development of their skills and education, right? So that is why you cannot force a woman to carry an unwanted pregnancy, which violates her autonomy. So this was much needed case and relief for this woman and also for various other women who are facing some similar issues. So this was all for this one. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. So the Election Commission of India came up with a new app known as the ECINET. So this is extremely important for prelims, particularly because it is a all-in-one election buddy. That means that earlier there were around 40 plus apps. Right now there is only one app to do various functions. For example, voter registration, real-time election results, various complaints and grievances, the candidate information and various other things. So mainly it was launched in 2026 January, and voters, officers, candidates, all of them will be using this particular app. In fact, this was also used to conduct SIR in around 12 states and union territories in the country. Now, what the Election Commission of India is trying to do is trying to push this app for reforms in the state election commissions. Now, We have to understand one thing. Why is the Election Commission of India bringing up this app right now at this moment? Because the timing is very right for conducting or pushing the agenda for one nation, one election, where Ramnath Kovind committee is actually looking into, whether we can actually go forward with the one nation, one election, and it has also recommended that there should be two phases. Phase 1, where we can actually conduct the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies election. Phase 2, where we can actually conduct the local bodies election within 100 days of phase 1 of elections. And according to various experts, the simultaneous elections of the one nation, one election will save around 4 lakh crore rupees, 1.5% of GDP, which can be later invested in health and education, right? And central and state separate elections right now, the main model is costing around 4 to 7 lakh crore of rupees. So that is why we need one nation, one election. But to conduct one nation, one election, we need single common electoral rule at the center and the state level, because the state governments actually use separate electoral rules, right, as of now. And there are so many issues of corruption, missing voters, duplication. That is why the SIR is being conducted, right? One of the main reasons. And that is exactly why right now, by pushing this app to the various state governments, Election Commission of India at the central level is trying to use its own soft power by giving the technology, by giving the various other benefits, so that the state election commissioners can actually follow this kind of one nation, one election principle that maybe will be implemented in the near future. Now, because prelims is near, you also have to understand the differences between the Election Commission of India and the state election commissions. Now, the main differences are that the ECI conducts elections mainly for the president, vice presidents, parliament and the state assemblies, where the state election commissioners, they do for the same at the local bodies. The next difference comes in the appointment process. So you know that the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners are appointed by the President of India. But right now we have a new process. There is a selection committee composed of the Prime Minister, the leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, and also an union minister who is nominated by the Prime Minister. So they will be selecting the Chief Election Commissioners and the election commissioners. Now, under the same, at the state level, we have the governor, and the various states have their own act themselves. When we talk about the removal of the election commissioners, the Chief Election Commissioner can only be removed as the process which is followed by the removal of a Supreme Court judge. But the election commissioners, they can be removed on the recommendation of the CEC. Now, when we talk about the State Election Commission, it is the same process which is followed in the process of removal of a High Court judge. The tenure at the central level is 6 years or 65 years, and at the state level it varies according to the various state governments. So, this was all for the one, and we'll now moving on to the next one. Guys, if anyone is in Delhi right now, you all are advised to go to the Global AI Summit which is taking place at the Bharat Mandapam. Because there are so many new initiatives, there are so many industrial experts, even the government officials who will be present there. So, in this background, the Bharat-VISTAAR is going to be launched today formally, and this is a very major e-governance initiative. Now, this Bharat-VISTAAR, the full form of the same is Bharat Virtually Integrated System to Access Agricultural Resources. So, this is trying to bring in a revolution in the Indian agricultural arena, and also trying to incorporate so many agricultural startups, because this will be a digital platform, a smartphone based platform, and even an offline platform if someone uses this helpline number. What it will be doing? It will be consisting of an AI model known as Bharti. This AI model Bharti will be conversing with our agricultural farmers. The farmers will be talking to them, in their own regional languages. As of now, we only have Hindi and English, but going forward, it will be integrated with the Bhashini AI portal. That means it will be able to converse with us in Hindi, in Marathi, in Bengali, in Malayalam, in Tamil, in so many languages on an app, on an helpline. For what? For actually giving advices to farmer with reference to their crops according to their own location. Right? It will also be giving guidance on various amounts of weather changes, pest, threats. It will also look into the various input data of the farmers by actually combining it with the AgriStack, which is our own digital platform, almost like the UPI platform, where this stack is composed of the farmer registry, the farmer land record, the various records, the various details. It will also look into proper maps, satellite maps, and also the various crops which are being sowed. So this means that this portal is going to have an overall impact on the agricultural sector. So it will be integrated with the Agri Stack and also with the ICAR scientific packages to give accurate and best results for the farmers. And this is where even the farmers will be getting AI guidance, what crops to grow or not. And also the various suitable AI algorithms will be designated by the startups in our Indian agriculture, who can actually try to boost their investments using the data that is generated from this platform. Because the Indian agri startups have always complained that the various data of the Indian farmers are not available on some public platforms. So this is one problem that we are going to solve. And at the end of the day, there will be around 10 schemes which will be covered in this. So it is very crucial for your prelims to know which of the schemes are being followed. For example, PM Kisan, Soil Health Card, Krishi Sichai Yojana. We also have the various Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, Kisan Credit Card. All of them will be included as a part of this scheme. And this is exactly how, using language, using AI, using satellite maps, using Agri Stack, this Bharat-VISTAAR will be totally revolutionizing the Indian agricultural arena. So now we'll be moving on to the last one. Guys, the US has been pressurizing Iran to stop its nuclear program. And that is where things are not going well between Iran and US. And in this background, the International Atomic Energy Agency is actually holding meets with Iran at Geneva. So let us actually look into what is popularly known as world's nuclear watchdog, or even Atoms for Peace. So IAEA was established in 1956 and the headquarters of the same is at Vienna, Austria. It is composed of around 178 countries and it also won surprisingly the Nobel Prize in 2005, right? And mainly what they do, they have various nuclear safeguards. That means that they have various experts, they have various data of various countries with nuclear weapons and without nuclear weapons. So they go for various inspections, monitoring, and also reports to the United Nations. And mainly when we look at the structure of this organization, it has the General Conference where all members actually meet on a yearly basis. Secondly, most importantly, Board of Governors are consisting of around 35 countries, where India is actually having a permanent seat, guys, right? So what it does, it actually recommends various changes that is needed to the General Conference, and also it looks into finalizing various safeguards agreements too. And finally, we have the Secretariat, which looks into the day-to-day operations. Now, when we talk about the main operation of the IAEA, firstly, it is about nuclear safeguards. Secondly, it is also about ensuring peace and promoting proper nuclear technology when we talk about the nuclear power plants or for medical treatments or for even agricultural practices. Also, it looks into various emergency responses in the cases of nuclear disasters and also for security purposes. Now, for India, actually, when we look at some prelims questions in 2020 and 18, right, there have been 2 questions directly related to IAEA. Now, when we talk about India's own nuclear program, we have civilian reactors for nuclear energy. We also have military reactors. Now, civilian reactors are actually under IAEA safeguards. So IAEA can come anytime and inspect our own nuclear reactors. But when we talk about the military ones, our own nuclear weapons, that is one thing which no country, not even IAEA, can come in India to look into it. Because India has communicated in a very clear way that India will be having minimum nuclear weapons. If at all India is attacked anytime by a nuclear weapon country such as China or Pakistan, India should be responding in equal and opposite and perhaps in much more higher aggression. So this is why, the IAEA is kept out of the military installations here. And India is also part of various other safeguards agreements. For example, Umbrella Agreement of 2009, right, wherein all of the various nuclear supplies, uranium fuel, and the various other details are actually clubbed under one umbrella agreement. Also, we have an India-specific additional protocol of 2014. It is trying to actually ensure smooth supplies of nuclear fuel, technology, expertise, also inspections and checks. And at the end of the day, we have around 16 reactors needing nuclear fuel. All of these are also certified by the IAEA. Apart from this, India and IAEA is also collaborating with reference to Global Nuclear Energy Hub and Research, which is located at Haryana. So now when we come to the main context of the news here, Iran has been enriching nuclear weapons. It has been enriching uranium to 60% and later it has plans to also reach 90% to reach weapons grade uranium. As of now, it has stockpile of around 400 to 440 kilos of nuclear weapons at various locations, as you can see on this map. Also important for your mapping perspective in prelims examination. So that is where, as of now, according to various experts, they're telling that Iran can take only 2 weeks to develop one nuclear weapon from scratch. So this was actually what the main context was. We will be following what will happen out of this IAEA talks. And finally, at the end of the day, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.